Welcome to our channel, where we delve into the darkest corners of folklore and horror. Today, we bring you The Bell at the Bottom of the Lake, a chilling tale of submerged secrets and haunting echoes. Prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. This story is generated and narrated by AI. If you notice any glitches in the voice, feel free to leave a comment. Your feedback helps improve future videos. They told me the lake hadn't been drained in over 300 years, not since the church disappeared beneath it. When the email came through, I assumed it was another historical salvage project. Eastern Europe is full of them: tombs, sunken villages, old munitions. I'd taken contracts from the Czech military, private collectors, even one overzealous priest with a budget. But this one was different. There was no company listed, only a man calling himself Dr. Marek Dvorak, offering far too much money for an expedition that required so little equipment. Just a lake, he'd said, drained for a hydroelectric project, and at its center, a church. I arrived in late autumn. The trees were skeletal and the wind sharp enough to sting. The village Kavlek, I believe it was called, was little more than a handful of brick houses and a single chapel perched on a hill. The road twisted along a crumbling ridge until it opened into a basin, and there it was. The lake was gone. In its place, mud, endless, gray, cracked like dead skin. At the center of it all, the silhouette of a stone bell tower, rising from the earth like the spine of some buried beast. Dr. Dvorak greeted me by the edge of the dried lake bed. He was tall and narrow, with gloves that didn't seem to come off even indoors. The church was lost during the winter floods of 1672, he said without ceremony. No survivors. The town simply relocated to higher ground. And what am I looking for? I asked. Relics. Candlesticks. Vestments. The altar slab, if it's intact. But he paused, eyes on the tower. Do not touch the bell. I chuckled, thinking it a joke. A diver told not to touch the only visible landmark, but his expression didn't shift. I mean it, he said. Photograph it, observe it, but do not ring it. By midday, I was suited and ready. No water meant no need for a tank, just rope, gloves, and a headset to communicate with Dvorak. He stayed in a temporary shack nearby, monitoring with binoculars and scribbling in a notebook. The first steps onto the basin felt wrong. Not slippery, spongy. The earth seemed to sigh beneath my boots, like something breathing below. The church itself was half swallowed by mud, but still intact. Stone walls wept with damp. Vines had somehow crept across it, though it had been underwater for centuries. I approached the doors. Iron hinges rusted but intact. Above them, etched in Latin, Non Vox Dei, said Custodia, not the voice of God, but the warden. Inside, the air was wrong, colder, and dry in a way that burned the lungs. Pews lay rotted and twisted, crushed against each other like bones in a shallow grave. At the far end, the altar had collapsed, but remnants remained: gold leaf, cracked stone, a wooden cross split clean in two. I began collecting small objects: a silver crucifix, a water-damaged hymnal, still wet, a carved figure of Saint Margaret, patroness of childbirth, but her face had been scraped off. The tower called to me. It stood to the left of the altar, narrow, spiraling upward into shadows. My light barely pierced the staircase. I climbed, each step groaned beneath my weight, though none gave way. At the top, the bell, iron, fused with rust and something else. A black crust like barnacles or charred blood. The rope had rotted to threads, but the clapper remained. hanging still, and then I heard something. It wasn't the bell. It was breathing, soft, wet, almost musical, like someone sighing underwater. But I was alone, or so I thought. That night, back in the village, I couldn't sleep, not from fear, not yet, but from sound. Somewhere, far off, I heard it, a bell ringing, one chime, long, resonant. I sat up in bed. The old and I stayed and had a window facing the lake bed. The tower was visible, a black tooth against the stars, and the sound, it came again. Chime, pause, chime. I dressed and went downstairs. The innkeeper, a withered woman who hadn't spoken 2 words to me, was sitting at the bar with a candle. "You hear it too," I said. She looked at me, then blew out the candle and walked away. The next morning, Dvorak was waiting with a box of tools and a flask of something foul-smelling. "You went up the tower," he said. I sharp. I didn't touch the bell. He didn't smile. "Good. Keep it that way." Second dive. This time, I brought a camera. The deeper I went, the less the mud resisted. It was as if the ground remembered my steps and made room. The altar had a hatch beneath it, not mechanical, stone, sealed with a carved disc. The same Latin inscription, repeated. I forced it open. Below, a tunnel, narrow, dripping, lined with bones. I followed it. My headset crackled, but Dvorak said nothing. At the end of the tunnel was a chamber perfectly circular, like a baptismal font the size of a room. In the center, a well, and above it, a stained glass window, long buried but untouched by rot. The window depicted a woman veiled in black, standing in water up to her waist, arms open, and beneath her, the bell. I heard it again, not in my ears this time, in my head, a single word, soft and soaking calm. I didn't sleep that night, not because I didn't try, but because the ringing continued, not in my ears, not outside my cabin, but inside my skull, a slow, dull tolling, so faint I could almost believe it was imagined, until it came with that voice, "Come." I sat up in bed and poured myself a glass of water from the sink. The water sloshed with a strange heaviness, and when I looked down, she was there, her face, not mine, reflected back at me, eyes hidden behind wet black lace, lips unmoving, but I heard her, whispering, "You have seen the gate." The next morning, I returned to the church alone. Dvorak had gone to town, or so he claimed. The villagers watched me from behind curtains. One old woman made the sign of the cross when I passed, but not the one I was familiar with. She touched her forehead, then her lips, then both ears. It made me pause, but only for a moment. I was already descending. The church felt colder than before, not physically, but spiritually, as if something had become aware of me. The wooden floorboards around the altar had swollen, softened by moisture that should not be there. The cross behind the altar was missing. I made my way to the crypt, past the statues whose faces had been scraped clean, past the broken organ, back to the well. It was no longer silent. Water had risen within it, though the lake remained bone dry. The water in the well shimmered faintly, unnaturally. I leaned in and saw movement, not ripples, but hands pressing from beneath the surface. A single rope dangled into the water, thin, ancient, attached to a small, rusted bell. It had not been there before. Of that, I was certain, and before I could even think, it rang, just once, soft, like a whisper made of metal. I fell backwards, heart pounding, the bell's sound still vibrating in my teeth. When I looked up, she was standing on the far side of the crypt, still, veil covering her face, water dripping from her fingertips, and in her hand, a rope. I ran. I didn't care if I looked mad. I fled the church and didn't stop until I reached the cabin. Dvorak was waiting. He said nothing as I burst in, pale and shaking. He simply poured me a drink and gestured for me to sit. I told him everything, and he listened, with an expression I didn't understand, pity or guilt. When I finished, he opened a small leather satchel, pulled out a photograph, and placed it in front of me. It showed the church, long ago, half submerged, mist curling around its spire, a wedding party gathered by the shore, and there she was, the veiled woman, standing alone, apart from the group. Her name was Alzbeta. He said she was to be married, but her husband drowned in that lake the day before the ceremony. She walked into the water during the wedding mass and never resurfaced. I stared at him. You mean this is some ghost story? You knew this when you brought me here. He nodded. Slowly, I needed someone who wouldn't be believed. Someone not from here. Someone expendable. I left that night, or tried to. I packed my gear and drove until I ran out of gas. The next village was 100 kilometers away, and I walked. But every puddle, every ditch, every roadside basin showed me her face. And the bell keeps ringing. Even now, wherever I go, it finds me. No one else hears it. No one sees her in the water. Only me. I've stopped drinking tap water, stopped showering. I only use dry cloths now, but it doesn't matter. Even the condensation on a window can show her. She's no longer whispering. Now she's asking, why did you run? Why did you leave me there? Will you return the bell? And the worst part is, I don't think I left anything behind in that church. Not my tools, not my sanity, but something left with me. Weeks passed, but the ringing never stopped. In the beginning, it was only at night. Now it tolls in daylight, in crowds, in silence, in dreams. I tried everything. Hypnosis, medication, isolation. The sound of that bell followed me like breath, and her image reflected back at me from every basin, every polished plate, even the shimmer of my own tears. I burned the clothes I wore into the church, smashed every mirror, avoided lakes, pools, fountains, even bottled water, but she always found a way. I saw her once in an airplane window, 30,000 feet above the earth. She was still, looking in from the outside, veil flowing like kelp in invisible currents. I still hidden, but somehow accusing. It wasn't guilt that brought me back. It was inevitability, like gravity, like drowning. I returned to the village under fog. The villagers didn't speak, but they watched. They knew I would come back. They always do. The lake remained dry, but something had changed. The air was heavier. Time seemed slower, as if the place itself was sinking. The church waited, half consumed by reeds and black mud. The bell tower rose like a broken tooth from a rotted jaw. She was waiting. This time, I brought no gear, no camera, no diving suit, only a small hand mirror and a rope. The inside of the church was darker than I remembered. As if the absence of water had only deepened the shadows, the pews were gone, or had sunk deeper into the earth, but the bell still hung in the tower, rustless, untouched, listening. I followed the whisper, down, back into the crypt, to the well. The water had risen again, far higher than before. It lapped at the rim, clear as glass, utterly still. And in its surface, she looked up at me, her face finally visible, pale, mouth sewn shut with black thread, eyes wide open and weeping. I understood. Then, the bell was never meant to be silent. It was meant to mourn, to warn. When it stopped ringing, they buried her grief, her pain, and it curdled. I lowered the mirror into the well, and she reached for it. But the moment her fingers touched the glass, she screamed, muffled by the thread through her lips, but it echoed in my bones. The church began to shake. Stone groaned. Water poured in from cracks in the walls. The lake, it was returning. I scrambled up the stairs, through the nave, out into the daylight. But behind me, I heard the bell toll, once, twice, 3 times. And I knew she was free. I don't remember how I got out, only that I woke up in the back of a truck, driven by a man who never said a word. He left me at a train station 2 countries away. No luggage, no passport, just soaked clothes and the faint smell of lilies. That was 6 months ago. The lake is full again, clear as crystal, but the church is gone. No one speaks of it, not in the village, not in any archive. It was as if it never existed. But I know better, because she came with me. Now, every drop of water I see reflects her face, the puddle beside the curb, the glass on my nightstand, the mist on a train window. She watches, and I can't look away. I tried moving inland, to the driest town I could find, but water is everywhere. Sweat, tears, blood. And in each reflection, she gets closer, not angry, not vengeful, just waiting. Waiting for me to return the bell, to take her place. So if you ever find yourself standing by a still lake, and you hear a faint chime in the wind, don't listen, don't look into the water, don't answer the voice when it calls. Because once the bell tolls for you, there's no silence that can save you. If you were captivated by the bell at the bottom of the lake, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of horror and mystery. Have you ever encountered a story that left you questioning reality? Share your thoughts in the comments below.